I describe it a lot to my yoga students that it's like who we are is the sun, but there's a lot of like stormy cloud cover in front, and that's a lot of the times what we're directly experiencing, and we can get confused and overly identified with whatever the storm is and forget that we're the sun. And so all of the practices of embodied presence, of inner yoga, and in Montessori are really about getting back to remembering who we are and deeply experiencing that sense of, the sunshine of within ourselves. And then learning that the storm is fine, that that's part of our humanness, that it's not a problem. The storm only becomes a problem when we get confused that that's who we are.
Mm-hmm. Welcome to the Weight Free Wellness Podcast. I'm Tara Bachland, and those words of wisdom are from today's guest, Dina Amsterdam. She is the founder of InnerYoga, and as I learned in this podcast, so much more. InnerYoga is about how to meet life's challenges and opportunities on and off the mat with awareness, kindness, breath, ease, and courage. And what I love is Dina not only speaks these beautiful words, but she shares how to apply them practically into our everyday lives. She still teaches regular yoga classes and teacher trainings in the San Francisco Bay Area. She's spending a lot of time on a project she's helping with at the MIT Media Lab, which she shares a lot about. Is really fascinating. And I really appreciate that she shares some real gems in how she works with C-level clients and what she shares and how she guides them. She actually shares with us, which was really a treat, and I really appreciate it. So we have many wonderful guests similar to Dina in their own, actually sometimes they're very different from Dina in their own special way, but sharing the inspiring words, insights, knowledge that they have and experiences in their own health and wellness, either their field or stories from health and healing. And if you want to make sure that you don't miss out, you can subscribe. That's the best way to stay very up to date and get every podcast. And you can do that at YouTube. You can also go to weightfreewellness.com. In the right sidebar, you'll see two icons, how to subscribe via your iPhone for iTunes or your tablet, and also for Android. Super easy, just click there and it will guide your phone into what to do there. And another way is if you just want summaries, just click to subscribe to the newsletter. And then also, we are on almost many of the social media platforms. You'll find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and so forth. We're most active on Facebook, and we're going to be doing more and more Facebook Live and even live podcasts. So make sure to like and follow on Facebook. Stay tuned because we're going to be doing more and more live events. I have a wonderful time with each guest that comes on and have so much fun interacting with them, and I know you will too, so I'm opening up that opportunity, so check that out. I've also updated my body typing quiz. You've probably heard me talk about body typing quite a bit. It has been simplified, it's fun, and also you'll get several weeks, each week you'll get an email with how to incorporate the foods, the exercises, the habits that will help each body type be more balanced. And I've also included a really fun relationship aspect to that too, like how each body type interacts with each other and why they may rub each other wrong or really be a nice match for one another. So that's been updated too. So of course that's at weightfreewellness.com. How about we get to the podcast with Dina, okay? Here you go, enjoy. The hunch when I was reading your website, I'm like, she must have some background in psychology or something like that.
Yeah.
And then is that true? I didn't see anything to confirm that.
Yeah. And I do. I grew up, my mom is a psychologist. And so I became really interested in the field when I was a teenager and started reading pretty voraciously. And then in college, I studied religion and philosophy and psychology. So I studied a lot of psychology, and I did a year-long internship at a day hospital with people who were, suicidal or really quite ill, but they were coming in, they were well enough to come in during the day. So it was a creative arts therapy program. So I did that. And And so, yeah, that's always been sort of a natural proclivity and interest of mine. And I thought for a long time I would go on and get a PhD, or I even thought about becoming a psychiatrist, but I kept being pulled back more into the mystical arts, into yoga, into meditation, into Buddhism. And eventually that just took off so much that I stuck with it. Although I did go back to school in the late 90s, I went back to school and studied something called psychoneuroimmunology, which is the study of the body-mind, really how the body-mind works, but from a scientific perspective. Essentially, by that time, I was teaching so many yoga classes. I was teaching probably 15 to 20 yoga classes a week at that time in San Francisco, which is insane. I don't recommend that to any young yoga teachers listening. That's too much. But I had come from a corporate job just for a short period of time, and you work a 50, 60 hour a week job. And then I was like, oh, if I'm going to teach yoga for now, that's not a real job, I thought way back then. I thought, oh, at least I need to be doing it like 40, 50 hours a week. So that was my logic, which was so flawed. But when I was doing all these classes, I was just observing people were having tremendous healing experiences. I had my own healing experiences, in the early 90s. And then people were having these amazing experiences of just such greater well-being in all different kinds of ways, physiologically and psychologically. And I was just really curious, what's going on from a scientific perspective? Like, what is the mechanism that's being impacted? And, my mom is a psychologist. My dad is a cardiologist. So I grew up with a lot of science in the house, and that sort of lens of respecting that lens. And so I knew experientially that yoga was having a profound and consistent impact, but I wanted to understand the mechanisms. So I went to graduate school, and I spent some time at Stanford working on some research, the largest research study to date. Well, at that time, I don't know about now, but that was done on Tai Chi in elderly people. And it was looking at the difference between doing a mindfulness-based practice versus doing just like regular exercise. And then there was also a control group. So I was really interested in understanding the differences. Why is this so much more powerful, doing yoga or Tai Chi or Qigong, than just being a runner,
So were there some results that you could share, or at least observations that were to you?
Yeah, I mean, there have been incredible studies since then, a lot of different studies looking at just meditation, or really primarily meditation practice and its effect on the brain, that I think are more interesting to talk about in terms of the results. There was a study, and I might not be quoting it exactly perfectly, that was done a few years ago, that just took people who'd never meditated, had them do 8 weeks of 20 minutes a day, about 20, or it might have been 15 minutes twice a day or 20 minutes once a day, but a really simple, just notice your breath, your mind wanders, bring your breath back. And they had them do that for 8 weeks. And they did an MRI of their brain before they started. And then they did an MRI of their brain afterwards. And there was significant changes in the gray matter of their brain, where the stress response areas were reduced. And then the areas that related to memory and other positive things that I can't remember, compassion, just the positive emotions were increased, were thick. They were literally thicker. So those kinds of studies, I mean, are even more amazing to me. Or studies that look at people with heart disease and atherosclerosis, which is the hardening of the arteries, and then they see that there was an actual reduction in the blockages of the arteries purely through meditation that is equivalent to those who took like the latest drug that does the same thing. So there's an incredible mechanism that kicks in the body-mind in terms of self-healing when our awareness is lined up, with in InnerYoga, the foundations of InnerYoga are awareness, kindness, breath, and ease. And there's a reason for that. It's like when those 4 things get really lined up in a person, there's a natural kind of intelligence in the body that takes over.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, even from so some people might say you don't have to do a strict meditative practice. Like this is the only way to do it. In those studies, or maybe as a result, in your opinion, are there ways to get similar results?
Oh, I mean, that's I think this is what I would say. And I'm not saying this from a science, my expertise is not in science. I was curious and I dove into that, and that was a bigger part of my life in the past. My interest now is really how to help people embed little moments of self-care fluidly in their life, so it's normalized in the course of their everyday life, whether that's in school or at work or just around the house or whatever someone's life is comprised of. So what I think is actually most essential is interrupting our negative habits, our negative habitual thinking, our self-critic, our self-judgment, our disconnection from our body, a kind of a going up into our being a head rather than a whole body, and coming back into our body, coming back into our breath, like recalibrating and cultivating what I like to call embodied presence throughout the day in little ways. To me, that's the most important kind of habit to develop, and that makes a really big difference over time. It's much more important to do that than to do an hour and a half really fantastic practice twice a week.
Yeah. I first learned about you through Gaia. I do online yoga, and so I first learned about you there, and I thought, I really like this class and some of the aspects that you're teaching. And then as I was looking into you more, I was like, wow, she has so much more to just what you can see in an hour video. Obviously that's true for about anyone, right? But so what I'm saying is, okay, as I started learning all these things, like, how are we going to fit this into one podcast? You touched on psychoneuroimmunology, and we're already past it. You could spend a whole hour just talking about that. But I would like you to share a little bit. You already did the 4 principles that you really focus on inner yoga. But tell us, a little bit more what inner yoga is, and what are some things that you're working on currently?
Yeah. For inner yoga.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'll tell you, I was kind of I always taught yoga. I started teaching yoga in 1994. And I always taught it from a place of self-observation without judgment, cultivating kindness. But I really taught kind of an alignment-based flow approach, which is what I had studied. And I felt that the practice was transformational. But I was fairly traditional the way that I taught it, kind of a fusion between vinyasa and Iyengar. And in 2008, when the market crashed, I found that my students really needed much more than coming to an hour and a half sort of, physical and spiritual experience. They actually needed to come and learn tools around how to be in relationship with themselves and support themselves when things were really difficult. How to be in relationship with their discomfort, essentially, is what they really, really needed help with. I live in San Francisco, and the market crash was devastating for a lot of people who were coming to my classes regularly. And I was doing a lot of one-on-one kind of what I would have called back then inner yoga coaching, like inner yoga, yoga therapy, or coaching with people who are in business or just had anxiety or all manner of issues. But I couldn't see all the people who were challenged, who wanted to see me at the time of the market crash. So what I ended up doing was just really thinking about how can I take this work that I'm doing one-on-one with people that I see is really impactful and really helping them to cope, and turn the challenge that they're in, into this crisis, into an evolutionary opportunity for themselves. And I really wanted to create something that would allow more people to be able to experience that and learn the basic skills to do that. And so I changed my classes from being kind of a little bit of yin yoga in the beginning, and then a really nice kind of slow but athletic flow practice, with a lot of alignment, I changed it to coming in, lying down for 20 minutes, and cultivating embodied awareness, really understanding how to be with your inner landscape, really understanding that in order to be deeply healthy and empowered, it's important to be connected to the physical body, the emotional body, the mental body, the spiritual body, and the energy body. So my classes started to change and just be a guided experience for those things, and then starting to help people look at, well, how can you be with that? So then we use the tools of awareness, kindness, breath, and ease in a really broken down, detailed, systematic way more than I do in any of the videos, I think probably that you've done. So that was the dawning of InnerYoga as a public offering, and I started doing workshops at that time as well, and they became really popular really fast in San Francisco. There was just such a need for it. And then out of that, I started to develop some of my longer students who've been with me some of them since 1994. I'd had people studying with me since then, and I still do. And they wanted to learn how to teach it, or they wanted to go deeper. So I ended up creating a 6-month immersion course, which is really like a course in learning, getting a huge toolkit of how to take care of yourself. And in that course, we include yin yoga, jin shinjitsu, meditation, pranayama, breathing practices, and a lot of the kind of psychology, Buddhist psychology and philosophy that I had, learned and developed both over, so many years, 20 years. So now there are InnerYoga teachers in San Francisco. There's, I think, around 20 InnerYoga classes a week in San Francisco, taught by the people that I've certified. So that's where InnerYoga is. I'm still leading those trainings. I'm in the middle of one right now. The first 6 months is really self-care, and then people who want to teach go on and do another at least 8 months after that, and they continue to deepen their experience, and then they learn how to embody InnerYoga as they're teaching, which is a whole other art form.
That's really cool. I saw on your website that you're offering the teacher training. And I was wondering, it makes sense now why you're offering the 100 hours. So to be certified with Yoga Alliance, you have to have 200-hour training, certified experienced yoga teacher. And so you're offering them in sections, but it makes sense because I did my yoga teacher training, not necessarily thinking I was going to teach yoga, but in hindsight, I see how much it was such a beneficial experience just for myself. Yeah. And personal growth.
Yeah, that is why I did my first teacher training too. The first one that I took, that I participated in, it was 1993, 94. And to me, that like yoga wasn't a real job at that point. There were no yoga studios yet. Mm-hmm. So it was all about self-care for me at that time. I really wanted to be able to know my practice deeply enough that I could practice by myself. Mm-hmm. That was the main impetus for me. But I will say that in the InnerYoga Part 1 training, what's really unique about it and different than other yoga trainings that I know about is that about half of the work that we do in the training has to do with how do you bring the yoga off the mat. Mm-hmm. So how are you in relationship with yourself at work when you're with your partner or spouse and you're having a difficult time, or if you're sick, or, how do you take care of yourself in the midst of a crisis, maybe a political crisis? How do you be with that, in a way that allows you to keep connecting to your essential nature, to your, to feel soul filled and to feel like you're living a deeply meaningful and purposeful life, and your heart can stay open, and vibrant in the face of that. So InnerYoga is so much about what we do off the mat. Even though we love the on the mat stuff, it's really about living your yoga.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from my experience, there's just no doubt that my yoga practice does help me in my daily life in those. Yeah. But I'm still chomping at the bit. Like I have very positive experiences from my own experience, but I'm still chomping at the bit. Like, okay, tell me what you tell the C-level people that you train in these and because it seems like maybe we assume that. So you train C-level people. Yeah. We assume that that's like the toughest of all toughest jobs, but I'm not going to necessarily feed into that because I think their daily life can be really tough in certain circumstances.
Yeah.
I'm still curious, like the approach that how do you explore with these people?
That's a great question. So the work that I would do with a C-level client is really similar to the work that I do with the Montessori teachers when I'm coaching them one-on-one. I really think it's about cultivating leadership capacity, and leadership starts with how you lead within, which is why I call that branch of my work Leadership Within. That's how I got that name. But, a good leader on the outside is somebody who's leading themselves internally in a loving and effective and clear manner. And so, the work that I do really has two parts to it. The first part is I really want to help someone become aware that their mind, their intelligence is not just in their head. Their intelligence is neuroscience, modern neuroscience is very clear that our mind is the result of our entire body, that there's a neural network that goes through our entire physiology. So the old thinking about the old thinking of thinking things through from an intellectual perspective is really outdated. You really can't access your best thinking when you're cut off from your body. So the first thing I do is just help people understand that, just as a foundation to get aligned with that. And then I teach them how to become embodied, just through basic breathing techniques and awareness practices. And I help them get to a place in themselves. So the first half is really supporting someone to have foundational well-being, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, energetically. So I help the person see where are they really out of balance in that way and give them just, some prescriptions. The second part of it is the ongoing work. It's where the deeper work happens. And it's really about helping that person identify what their biggest challenges are and then helping them see, as I was saying before, how they can utilize that challenge as an opportunity, how that challenge is actually an evolutionary opportunity for them that has come up over and over again in their life, that it's not an isolated incident. It's not a particularly difficult, coworker or employee or boss. It's actually that person is a reflection, or that circumstance is a reflection of a challenge that they've had repeatedly. Mm-hmm. And I've never had a client yet who can't find that story, who can't find that truth, that, wow, this is so familiar. This is incredibly familiar. And so I help create a space that's, fairly intimate, but safe for the person to go in and kind of be a little vulnerable and recognize that, and then dig in on, wow, what is that? How is that asking me to grow? Mm-hmm. Where is it that I'm dislocating from myself? Or what is the essential quality within me that wants to blossom and be strengthened in the face of this? So a big part of it is a perspective shift, giving people a different way to look at the things that are hard for them. And then getting them on kind of an inspirational path of being excited about moving through this, and evolving themselves and seeing what that will allow them to accomplish on the other side. Mm-hmm. So it's not for the faint at heart. I'm not really interested in working with clients who aren't stepping into our work with a lot of courage, mm-hmm. and don't have a deep desire to evolve. Those are two basic requirements for the work that I would do with someone.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It takes courage in a way to see that aspect and be willing to open up that aspect in yourself.
I would say it takes courage, Tara, and also compassion.
Yeah.
Like those are the two. And the way that I frame it for people a lot of times, because at first people can be like, oh, this is going to, that sounds so heavy, and the way that I joke around about it is, this is really your karmic PhD program. Like this is the curriculum for your, to get your karmic PhD. And that way of thinking it through really is helpful for people. It becomes very purposeful. Mm-hmm. And also, once people have a deep awareness of the places they're getting stuck repeatedly, they want to get off that merry-go-round. They don't want to keep doing that over and over when they see, oh my God, this is just happening. If I don't do something about this, it's just going to keep happening.
It'll show up in some other way.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a question based upon that is, to me, identifying the patterns isn't as difficult usually, because I have helpful people around me too that compassionately help me to see my.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's great.
Helpful, a wonderful gift. But what has come to my mind is, when do you push for something and when do you allow and accept? You know what I mean?
Well, okay. So allowing and accepting happens always. So always allowing, always meeting the client, another human being, with a sense of, loving acceptance and compassion. Mm-hmm. Right. But there's something that I like to call fierce compassion, which is when I could say, let's say you're telling me like you're in a lot of pain. And so, for example, you're binge eating, right? And so I might say, I actually had an eating disorder, a compulsive eating disorder when I was in college. So I got into yoga partly because of that. It helped me heal that. And so I healed that completely. But so this is an example that I can relate to. And I did work with a lot of women in the 90s mostly and helped them through this. So I've worked with a lot of women around their eating issues and body image issues at a certain point in my career. But if you had that habit, I would probably be with you and I would ask you to tell me like what are you feeling when you're reaching for the food? Like, what is going on for you when you're doing that? And you would share with me that you're feeling, a lot of grief, or you're feeling a lot of anger or whatever. You're having overwhelming emotion, let's say, and you just don't want to feel it. And so that's why you're eating. And so I would hold that with a lot of loving kindness and empathy. I would understand that. And then I would also ask you to notice how you feel after you binge. In fact, I would ask you, if you were my client, I would invite you to just do whatever felt right to you. You could still binge, but just the commitment I would ask from you is to keep a journal when you choose to binge, to write down what you feel afterwards, exactly how it feels, so that you're starting to align. A lot of the work I do is helping people align with reality. And that is that's a kind of fierce compassion. So I'd ask you to align with the reality of what it feels like to hurt yourself by binging, and to be really honest about that with yourself, And I would say, when you told me that you were hurting yourself, if you started to go into denial, part of calling someone out would be like, yeah, and I hear that like that really hurts you. And then you go into a cycle of self-hatred around that after you do that, Mm-hmm. So, and a typical thing I'd say is like, so how's that working for you?
Yeah.
So there's like a matter of factness and a calling a person to be aligned with the truth that there's pain, and the truth that the mechanism to deal with it right now is actually causing more suffering, and just to sit with that truth and align with that truth. That doesn't mean the next thing is like, you need to stop binging. The next thing is to just hold that. It's just to hold that awareness and live into that for a little while and see what evolves from that.
Yeah. One of those awkward poses to hold.
Yeah. But be in the discomfort. Exactly.
I can see that being beneficial too in like your C-level when maybe they have a conflict going on. And like, do I just keep sliding it under the rug, just letting it go? Or when do I do something, say something, and what can I really do?
I find that the work helping people to become more integrated, to have more of an embodied intelligence, allows them to make much better decisions in terms of how they deal with the things that are uncomfortable for them intrapersonally and interpersonally, that they're not going to be as reactive and impulsive in the way that they engage when there's stress. So and it also, what it does when you're working with someone who's high up in an organization is others see them. They end up modeling that behavior, and then that trickles down through the organization.
Totally.
Yeah.
I imagine that you mentioned the Montessori programs, and was that why you were in Jamaica recently? You were teaching?
Yeah, I was in Jamaica because the American Montessori Society invited me to come be the featured speaker to their heads of schools, the heads of schools from about 80 different schools from around the country, who chose to go to Jamaica for a few days.
Sounds great.
And so I led a very experiential program for them, which is different. They usually just have a speaker who speaks, like a PowerPoint type situation. And I really don't feel like the value that I can offer is there just if I'm going to just lecture. Sometimes I'll just lecture, but I really like to get people involved in a practice. Mm-hmm. And so I had 6 hours with them, 3 on Saturday, 3 on Sunday. And it was very different for them, very new. And, I think it was a pretty radical exploration for them.
So this was Montessori overall. This was not the wildflower program that
Exactly. The American Montessori Society is one of a few large, national and international Montessori organizations. So they're supporting all different kinds of, the schools, the people that come to their programs are coming from schools from all over the country that are not necessarily affiliated with each other. The thing that they have in common is that they're Montessori schools. So what I was doing there is really bringing the work that I'm doing at Wildflower, which is a network of innovative schools that came out of MIT, and the work that I was doing there. What's special about my role, so I'm the National Director of Leadership Development, Coaching, and Wholeness, creating a culture of wholeness. And so I've developed a lot of embedded practices. Aside from coaching all the teachers and developing trainings and things like that for them, I have embedded a lot of practices into their day, or I've developed a lot of practices that they can choose to embed into their day if they want to. And most of them choose to do that. So, for example, I know I'm jumping topics, but I want to share this with you and then I'll come back to Jamaica. But for example, they'll start, if you have a kind of a small shopfront school that has maybe 20 children in it and 2 teachers, the teachers will arrive about 10 minutes earlier than they need to so that they can set up the classroom. And in Montessori, it's really important that you set up the outer environment so that the children can come in and it's peaceful and the materials are ready for them. And they really believe that how you set up the outer environment affects the inner environment of the child and affects their learning and their joy and their own peace. And so the teachers take an extra 10 minutes to set up their own inner environment. And this is really in alignment with Maria Montessori's work, who talked a lot about the spiritual transformation and setup of the teacher. But unfortunately, like in Montessori, as far as I know, that piece has gotten a little bit lost. And so when we started developing the Wildflower schools, I noticed that. And so I just created this partner practice. The teachers sit down together, they do breathing, they open the 3 centers, the belly, the heart, the head, the physical, the emotional, and the mental. They bring compassion to whatever's going on in there. And then they open their eyes and they share what's most true for them, how they're doing that day with their co-teacher, and they just listen to each other, and then they share an intention for the day, and then they ask for support, what support they'd like during the day. And there's a similar practice they do at the end of the day once the children leave with gratitude, offering gratitude to each other for specific things that went well. And this connects to Rick Hanson's work. He's a neuroscientist, and he talks a lot about how important it is to take in the good, to reiterate the good things, because our brains are wired to remember the bad and not the good. Mm-hmm. And so we developed that so that the teacher teams would be stronger and more positive. Mm-hmm. So I was asked to do this program for the heads of school in Jamaica. Basically, they wanted me to share about the work that I've developed to support the spiritual setup and transformation of the teacher. And so that's what I did.
Wow, that's really neat. And that's not saying enough really about it. That's kind of a, but it's almost, I can see what you're saying where you like to give people an experiential talk or experience, because there's several things that you've said, like, oh, I'd like to feel that, like to be, or what good is it even just doing for the teachers to go home, kind of put a close on their day and then go home from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And teaching, I mean, you were saying you think being a CEO is probably a really stressful job. I'd say being a teacher is even more stressful.
Yeah, I'm sure you get a lot of perspective.
Yeah.
From each side.
I do. I think teaching is I think that it's a real reflection of sort of the confusion in our culture, that teachers are not more highly respected, paid more. I think they have an incredibly difficult job, and it's such an honorable job, and they're developing the future.
Yeah.
So, so I'm happy to be able to contribute in this way. In fact, when I had my experience at Kripalu, which is where I did my first teacher training, and I was so, excited after I had that experience. I had healed this eating disorder, and it made me want to go into organizational development. I thought, that's what I was going to do. And I also really felt inspired to affect education. I felt like every kindergartner should not go into first grade until they know these basic tools, like know how to breathe, know they have a body, know there are feelings in their body, like how to express themselves, how to calm themselves, like all these basic tools that I had learned when I was in college. When I found Kripalu, I felt like, wow, we really, what's going on? Like, why is this not an integral part of our education, like our educational system? So when the founder of Wildflower, Sep, came on a retreat with me, he had been a coaching client of mine for a long time, and he came on a silent retreat I was leading. And then he asked me if I would be interested in becoming a part of this and have an impact on this network of schools that he was envisioning growing. I was so excited. It felt like, a dream I had, like a vision I had from 20 years prior had now come to fruition. And I had really wanted that. And I had said, at some point, I'm going to get involved in education. And then all of a sudden there it was. And it's been really amazing.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
So you've highlighted what Wildflower is like. And I watched, I got 1 through 6 of what Sep mentioned in his TEDx video, which is really enlightening.
Yeah.
Would you kind of paint a picture for us what this school is like?
What Wildflower is like? Yeah. So Wildflower, the first thing you would notice if you walked into a Wildflower school is, for one thing, it's small. It's just a single shopfront school. The teachers we don't even call them teachers, we call them teacher leaders, because they're the heads of school as well. There's no administration. They do it all. And so you notice that it's fairly small, like a one-room schoolhouse. Hold on one second. Okay. You would notice that it's incredibly beautiful, that there's a lot of nature. There are these giant planters, and there's probably some sticks or moss or something on the walls. There's beautiful watercolor art around. Everything is natural, made of wood. It's just like an incredibly beautiful space, beyond what you've probably ever seen in a school. That's the first thing that everybody remarks upon. And the reason that the school is so beautiful and natural is because, again, we believe that the environment deeply impacts the children, and we want them to grow up we want them to feel the beauty of the world. We want them to feel the beauty in their environment and let that support them. Nature is a really big piece of our philosophy, and so that's reflected in the interior design of the schools. It's also a part of the schools or shopfronts, so they don't have outdoor spaces, but they're always located near parks. So they spend a good amount of time outside. Some of the schools even have their parents drop them off in a park, and they gather there and then play and then come back. Oftentimes we'll have an artist in residence, so the kind of understanding the creative spirit has been important. So there might be a musician or a filmmaker or a painter doing their work in the classroom, and the children will go and observe and watch just whenever they feel like it. And let's see. We invite parents to be more involved than a regular school. So the idea of community involvement, both in terms of if it's next to a coffee shop, we'd maybe ask the coffee shop to put little children's tables and chairs in there so the children can go there and feel like there's a place for them in their neighborhood, which is really sweet. And different schools include parents in different ways. Some of the schools have a Friday set aside for a certain number of parents to rotate in to become a part of the environment, because we really believe in blurring the lines between school and home. And I just started participating in this year, rolling out some parent education in terms of the work I do, the leadership within work, helping parents start to understand, the Wildflower parents start to understand this philosophy so that the teachers and the parents are aligned within themselves and in the way they're being with their children.
That seems like a really important component, as I've just observed friends with young children and they're adopting child rearing philosophies. And he mentions in his own TEDx video, he says, I went to school for 9 years to become and my whole parenting training was comprised of 2 books. There's a little bit of a discrepancy there.
Yeah.
It seems like there's a need for, if you're going to send your kids to a school, that there's an education process for the whole family.
Yeah. Well, so we're in the process. SEP wrote a huge canon of documents describing like what is Wildflower and what is our vision and intention in the world and how do we do things. It's in the process of being sort of refined right now, but the 3 main practices that he describes are compassionate kindness, non-judgmental observation, and autonomy with support. And a lot of the work I do is around helping to actually create practices that support those capacities, allow someone to be compassionately kind when they don't necessarily feel like it, or how to live in a way that allows for deep observation and without judgment, and how to be autonomous but to know how to ask for support, how to cultivate that leadership quality, which is the ability to get help when you need it, to be humble, to be vulnerable is really important in a leader. So what we found is, I worked really in depth for the last several years with the teachers to develop those capacities and help them navigate the various obstacles that were in the way for them in terms of being able to live into those. And then what we found is that sometimes we'd have some challenges with parents who weren't getting the same kind of support. So our teachers were coming from one perspective in our parent community who are beautiful and well-intentioned, but also go through a lot of difficult challenges when you're a new parent. And they didn't have any kind of foundation around how to deal with their own stress or how to be in communication in a way that was really in the Wildflower method of the kind of culture that we want to create, not just in our schools, but in our cities, So the vision is actually much bigger than the school. It's really about how can we create communities. The parents are as important to us as the children, but we're growing. We're only 3 years old now, 3.5 years old. And so we're growing really fast. We're actually trying to keep our growth down a little bit so that we can perfect our model and understand how is it we can include everyone and really support them.
It's really interesting that this education model popped up in this line of interviews. With you coming up. Yeah. It's been on my mind, like I said, again, observing friends and my own, as a stepmom, helping to raise my stepson, they're different experiences and so forth.
Yeah.
And so my initial question was, so it's very interesting to me that this kind of popped up it wasn't something I was planning on, but because I'm very interested and want to bring actually more childhood development aspects to this podcast. Yeah. Curious, and what I think I'm gathering is that your role is more in helping the teachers to learn these concepts so that will have the trickle-down effect.
Yeah. It is. I also started developing some really beautiful tools to support the children as well.
Can you get a little more specific? Like, are there examples or stories? Or
if you give me a second, I could actually go get something to show you. That's a visual. Do you want me to?
We'll have to describe it to the listening audience, but it's worth a try.
Yeah. I mean, okay. So, in some ways what I'm doing with all of the people that I work with, my InnerYoga students, when I started doing InnerYoga classes in San Francisco, I was teaching them kind of a new language, recognizing that their mind is integrated throughout their whole body, and how to talk about their feeling states, how to recognize their inner landscape. I think that's maybe one of the biggest things that I've done, is really make the inner landscape more real for people. Mm-hmm. And all the 5 aspects of it: physical, emotional, mental, energetic, and spiritual. And so helping adults do that in a yoga studio or in a workplace, there's differences in that of how I would do that, but I'm getting to the same end goal. Whether I have someone sitting in a chair with me or lying down in a yoga studio. And then the question became, how do I do that with children? So there are 2 approaches that are in the middle of being developed right now. And I just, part of the challenge is that when you're doing Wildflower is really a startup, so we've developed these schools really quickly. They've just been spreading like wildflowers. And we have this foundation now. We just hired in June the former CEO of Teach for America. So he's our CEO and he's amazing, Matt Kramer. And we're just getting our infrastructure set. And I wear a lot of different hats. And so one of the hats I do wear is how to do this for children, but it's just been on the back burner. But before it went on the back burner, I developed something called the Inner Landscape cards. Mm-hmm. So I did this with an amazing artist who's at MIT, who was in the same lab as me. And I asked her to basically do some beautiful watercolors or drawings of various landscapes. So like you would have like a landscape like that, which is, can you see it? Just like beautiful flowers, a blue sky. Or you'd have a landscape like that, which is like lightning.
Lots of gray colors.
Yeah, there was lightning bolts going through there. Mm-hmm. And then this would just be like a calm, some of them are just color washes.
Mm. Lots of blue, beautiful shades of blue.
Yes, this is, I don't know if you'll be able to see this through the video, but that's a tornado.
In Minnesota, I'm familiar with those.
Yeah. So, or I love this one. It's just kind of like these barren trees and this kind of soft landscape. So, and then I asked her if she would draw a bunch of different children with different facial expressions. And these are on these beautiful wooden cards that we actually cut and sanded.
So different expressions. The other one was either a big smile or kind of a silly face, or
she's frowning a little bit.
She was frowning.
Oh, and the first one was, she was happy. Yeah. She was really happy. So there are lots of these. This one is mad. So there's all these different beautiful landscapes, and then there are just plain color washes that aren't of anything. So there are these 3 types: the faces, the landscapes, and the color washes. And the children, there's a few different ways that children can work with these. They can be set out, and a child can just be asked, how do you feel right now? I had a wonderful experience with a brother and sister. He was like 2.5. She's about 3.5, 4. And I asked them to match the landscape with the face, with the color wash. And there's no right answer. I just asked them to put them together. And then I chose a few and said, why did you put those together? And the little boy, who could talk really well, but maybe he was almost 3, he said, sometimes when I feel mad, it's like a storm inside me. So he had the mad expression, and then like a gray card, and then one of the stormy cards. And that was just it's like starting to get them to talk about what it feels like inside and have a way other than just words to express that. Mm-hmm. So we also have this we had the older children, we have an elementary school, and we had them embroider the outline of a body on a large kind of burlap sack type of thing in white yarn, and then have the children put in the different parts of their body, like the different cards, that all the cards are spread out, and they can just choose which ones they want to put in different places to show what they're experiencing right then. Or have them do that, and then guide them through a little activity, and then have them do it again and see how much has changed. There's so many ways that we can use this, and I'm working with Montessorians, kind of some Montessorians whose expertise is in developing new materials on what are the best ways to implement this for the children. But children love it. And actually at MIT, I had a giant human like an outline of a human on butcher paper on a table, and these cards laid out, and people would just come by and start doing it, like expressing what was going on. They'd be like, oh, let me express where I am right now. And it was really helpful, especially there where people are so heady. They're so kind of caught in this narrow focus, to like actually pause and look, oh, what do I feel inside my body? So that's one tool, because Montessori is very material heavy. They like tactile things, beautiful things. So that was one thing that I developed there. And then another thing that I'm working on is a storybook that a teacher can read that guides the children through an experience. An experience of lying in a field on grass and then sinking their body into the grass, and different kinds of things will happen, and they can support themselves through it, and starting to get a feeling of the outer world and the inner world and how those interact for them. So
that's really cool. Things that if we all started with that kind of education, because we're talking about the little boy who could communicate well verbally, which is really an advanced concept. If you think about it, it's much more natural for us to relate through the tactile things that you're mentioning, or the metaphors that are natural to us, which is why I like using metaphor so much, because we can in such a deeper way.
Yeah, I think that as children, most of us have more of a connection to our embodiment. And then because our culture is so, disconnected in that way, we learn to be disconnected. Or we learn that our body is like a tool that we utilize in certain ways, but we don't feel it as ourself, as a deeply intimate part of ourselves, usually. That's unless we go on a healing journey to do that for most people. I remember being at summer camp when I was little, and my camp counselor said, oh, that we're going to do something really cool. I have a friend coming who's going to guide us through this really cool experience. And I was like, okay. And she said, just go out on the hillside. It was right next to our cabin, and just hang out on the grass. And her friend came and asked us to lie down on our backs on the grass. And she basically, as far as I can remember it, I was probably, I may have just been maybe like 8 years old at that time. She guided us through a body scan, just through a body scan through each part of our body, and then invited us to feel the earth under us and let ourselves relax, and then feel the sun on us. And what did that feel like? And, it was like this amazing experience of feeling like my body all of a sudden had become a part of the environment in a way that I could feel as much as I could touch the grass. I could touch the inside of my being and feel it. And that had such a big impact on me, just that one experience.
Very memorable.
Yeah, I remember it like it happened, I don't remember all her words, but I remember how it made me feel and how much I loved it and how relaxed and joyful I felt.
That's really nice.
Yeah.
Now, I'm curious, what are you finding that the parents who bring their children into this environment, what are they looking for that seems to be matching with what Wildflower's offering?
Oh, well, first of all, a big piece is just the authentic Montessori piece. I think that really matters to them. I think that a lot of the parents want to be more involved in their children's education than you can in just like a regular school. I think they love the beauty piece, like the nature and the beauty piece, and just the whole philosophy, the whole philosophy. And what's beautiful about Montessori is it really believes that it's very much what I believe in InnerYoga, which is that each of us are essentially good. We have innate goodness within us. And in Montessori, I'm not a Montessori expert, but to the degree that I've learned some things, that the job of the teacher is to remove the obstacles and to like provide the stimulation that will allow the child to come into that natural goodness, into a natural state of peacefulness and curiosity and deep focus. And I really see adults in the same way, or humans in the same way, that we have an essential goodness, and it's about allowing ourselves to experience that. I describe it a lot to my yoga students that it's like who we are is the sun, but there's a lot of like stormy cloud cover in front, and that's a lot of the times what we're directly experiencing, and we can get confused and overly identified with whatever the storm is and forget that we're the sun. And so all of the practices of embodied presence, of inner yoga, and in Montessori are really about getting back to remembering who we are and deeply experiencing that sense of, the sunshine within ourselves. And then learning that the storm is fine, that's part of our humanness, that it's not a problem. The storm only becomes a problem when we get confused that that's who we are.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's so beautiful too that it sounds like inner yoga was really born at a time where our nation, for sure, and even expanded beyond that, economically was in a storm.
Yeah.
To find the inner sun during that time. And
yeah.
I do have a near concluding question, and I didn't prep you for this, so I hope it doesn't catch you too off guard, but usually
it's okay.
They're pretty good on their feet.
Yeah.
Especially, this is, and again, so this is related, but I feel like I have to preface it because it has been such a cloudy subject, I think, for our nation, which has especially since the inauguration, since all what are they called? Well, the orders that Trump has put in place. And I honestly, and I want to get your feedback as from inner yoga, if we were one of if as a nation, anyone who's listening who wants to participate, we're one of your clients. If someone is experiencing what seems to be, it seems like there's such a dividing, it's not only a storm, what's happening post-election. It's very divisive. It's like there's the parting of the waters kind of thing. And for me, I'm trying to remain an observer. It's challenging to be non-judgmental, which is an aspect of yoga. There's certain aspects of compassion that are challenging when you see people who are harming one another, right? Outright. And I'm honestly, I'm a pretty mellow person. Like, I don't get easily worked up about things, but it's been really disappointing to see people who even tout themselves online as being very spiritually minded or centered to be honestly acting very differently, in my opinion. And I'm curious, from an inner yoga perspective, what would you say to people who are really feeling, whether it's directly what's going on in the legislative or executive branch, or what feelings around people around you, or just what you're reading on Facebook? How would you say to navigate these emotions?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, remember, part of inner yoga, a big part of inner yoga is being aligned with reality, right? So I definitely, even though I believe that, I was using the analogy that our innate goodness is like the sun, our humanness, as I said, includes storms. And our anyone who's been married knows that there are storms there, that or with children, there are storms there, and communities, there are storms, and nationally there are storms. This is a really big storm, for sure. So on the positive side, what I've seen is that there were a lot of people in our country who were a little bit just like content, asleep a little bit, not deeply connected to their soul or to their values. Maybe it was a little bit of a peripheral idea. And this has really shaken people to their core. And I see people waking up all over the place, like really waking up and questioning what is important to me, what do I stand for, and how am I going to be with this challenge in me, just exactly what you're asking. And so that wake up, for me, that's like the silver lining. I love that people are waking up, and I love that they're speaking their truth. Okay, like there's that. What I think is really important is that we cultivate in a very, very embodied, that we are resolved to become the embodiment of courage and compassion, which I mentioned earlier. That, even if we're shaking in the storm, to keep our hearts open, to be determined to keep our hearts open, to keep cultivating our own light and figuring out what do we need to do first on an individual level to do that. So maybe I'm someone who hasn't been very physically active, and in order to be able to stand my ground and keep my heart open, I need to get my legs stronger, literally. Do you know what I'm saying? So I think what's really important in InnerYoga, we talk a lot about opening to the inner landscape, the emotions, especially in the mind, but not believing the hype, not believing the story, not getting caught up in drama. I teach a lot of tools around not getting pulled into that and overly identified. And I think that's especially important now. So it's keeping your heart open, being strong and courageous, getting to the essential truths for you, not getting swirled in the drama of yourself or others, at the same time being very clear about what is right action. So having acceptance and allowing things to be as they are does not mean that we don't act. So if we feel clear, it's like if I want to go deeper in alignment into triangle pose, I'm not just going to collapse. I'm going to invigorate and harness my energy and kind of check out where I am and have an intention, go in that direction and do what I can in that direction, and then pause and then reassess. So it's like not getting caught up in a frenetic reactive place, being more discerning and strong and heart-centered. That's it. I talked a lot at the beginning of the year about how important it is to be soul-filled, to let your heart be open and really be soul-filled and be determined in that. And that requires vulnerability, the willingness to be vulnerable. I think it's easy to contract in anger. If anger brings people, if there's a certain amount of righteous anger that I think is acceptable, where people feel like their internal no, if somebody is physically abusing you and you feel that anger that allows you to draw your boundary and say no, that's great in order to draw your boundary. And that at a certain point, that anger becomes toxic and you get pulled into it. So it's like looking at that, how are you using your energy and where is your mind state? I think it's really important to do that for yourself and then connect with other people who are in alignment with the kind of the right action you want to take, to be in alignment with that within a community and have support and band together. I think all of that is really important. I do think we're in a very precarious time, where things can escalate, and things can escalate in a way, and they already started escalating, where people's rights and freedoms are at risk. And so it is important to participate. Yet it's kind of like in a non crisis time, where you can see certain people who are perhaps environmental activists, right? And they can come from a place. Sometimes they're great. I don't want to be judging all environmental activists. I appreciate them deeply. But an individual person could be driven into their activism from a place of anger. And eventually you see that person just burn out and get exhausted because that anger is toxic within them. So it's that old saying, it's like, be the light you want to see in the world. So first take care, put your own seatbelt on first, or your own oxygen mask on first, rather, and then figure out how to bring oxygen to the community and the nation.
Yeah,
that's what I would say.
Points. I think you can make great illustrations. There's always a silver lining, and that the word values has come up for me a lot lately too. Just saying, that's what has felt right too, is that we are being struck, our values chords are being strummed, and it's not a bad thing.
No, it's good. I think we have become an incredibly superficial culture for the most part, like in a very materialistic, very comfortable culture. And this is asking people to go more inside and connect with what really matters to them and participate for themselves, and for each other, with each other. I find that there's lots of new people coming into, I teach a couple public classes still a week just because I love teaching InnerYoga. And there's all new people just flooding into those classes. And I just feel like there are people who are willing to lie down and be they really want to cultivate intimacy with themselves in a way that they weren't interested in before, because they need to learn how to kind of up their game, so to speak. They need to learn how to support themselves at a deeper level so that they can be proactive, so that they can find their joy, and they can find their light amidst the storm, So, I said on New Year's Eve, I teach this huge, sort of transformational event. And I kept saying, in a time of darkness, we're really inspired to become the light. Like when it's really, really dark out, we really recognize if we're illuminated or not. And it makes us want to illuminate. And it makes us want to figure out how to illuminate better and longer, and how to help others illuminate. And I think that's the calling, and then all of the very practical things that happen, I keep sending out my blessings and good energy to the people who know the laws and who are connected and have the resources to fight it on a high, on a practical level, who make our judicial system work. Those are great things. I think the danger at a time like this is to get mired in the drama and to get burdened by the toxicity, and in a very unskillful way, just keep running that in the mind, and then that pollutes the body. And so, I read the news and I want to understand more than ever what's going on, but I definitely don't allow that disturbance into my space. Other than it's heartbreaking to see some of the pain that people are going through, but I don't, have a repetitive cycle mentally around what's happening, because that doesn't help anyone. It
really doesn't. And it's pervasive. It's almost like you're really hungry. Me too. I've been intrigued more than ever to be aware of what's going on.
Yeah.
If you're hungry and you're eating this dish that has all kinds of stuff in it, and a third of it you don't like, picking it out, trying to get what will sustain you and joy and help you to, I don't know, maybe that's not the best analogy but.
Well, I think you have to be more, one needs to be more discerning about what we put on our plate.
Absolutely.
That's it. I actually I've not been engaging in Facebook at all.
Yeah.
Because to me, it's just a barrage of so much stuff. I have a few different columnists that I read regularly, and a few different people who send me stuff that's really informative about what's happening.
And you line up with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that was a good illustration. Yeah. I guess I was thinking in Facebook terms where you're kind of getting fed what's on
you're at a buffet and it's just all on your plate.
But to be more discerning actually what you choose.
Yeah.
Which you have to be much more conscious of these days.
Yeah.
All of what's available. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation.
Oh, me too.
I really want to learn more how things develop with you and your projects. And
thank you.
Please let us know, let the audience know how they can find you, and if there's anything coming up that they should know about.
Yeah. Right now, mostly I'm focused so much on my work with Wildflower. It takes up about 70% of my time. I do private clients. So if somebody's really wanting to do some coaching, they can contact me at my email, dinaamsterdam@gmail.com, DinaAmsterdam@gmail. So that's a way that people can work with me. And I lead regular workshops in the Bay Area. And then I'm probably in the fall I'll be starting another inner yoga immersion, and people fly from all over the country to do those because the way they're arranged is one weekend per month. And so I've had people fly in from all kinds of places to do that. So that's another way someone can do the immersion. And then, of course, they can do my videos on Gaia. And I have a YouTube channel that I have just kind of slapped some videos up there a while ago, and I haven't really been cultivating it. But there are some nice short little inner yoga practices that are more off the mat oriented. And that's YouTube channel is called Living Inner Yoga. So hopefully sometime soon my website will be revamped and there will be a lot more information there and ways to connect to my work. But and I'm working on a book, so hopefully that will happen as well soon. Yeah.
On inner yoga, I'm assuming, the philosophy.
Do you know what? Now there's 2 books that are wanting to be born from me, and the one that I'm really working on right now is More Leadership Within, which is about how do you take these practices into an organization. So it's really inspired by my work at Wildflower. And the other book would be more of an inner yoga self-care. How can you cultivate self-care in your life and, through inner yoga. So yeah, so many projects. I'm sure you have a similar challenge in your world.
Yeah. Which one gets priority?
Yeah, exactly.
Totally.
Exactly.
Well, thank you again so much. It's been a delight. And
thank you.
Have a wonderful day.
You too, Tara. Thank you so much. Bye.